Hi everyone, it's Robin from Upstyle here to show you how to make a fabric clutch using my Classic Clutch Pro pattern. And as you can see, it comes in 3 sizes and it's really simple to put together. There's no seam on the bottom. You can add a label to the inside if you'd like. It's a really fun project. Makes for a great gift for bridesmaids, any holiday basically. So if you have any questions, please let me know via Etsy, please. I get back to you a lot sooner if you contact me through Etsy. And I hope you enjoy the video. You'll need to purchase the pattern from my Etsy shop. This is the Classic Clutch Pro pattern. You'll need some fabric for the exterior of the clutch. This is a medium weight linen. And some fabric for the lining of the clutch. This is a medium weight cotton blend. And you'll need some fusible fleece and some fusible woven interfacing. And you'll also need a classic style purse frame. This is the small 6x3 inch. It also comes in 8x3 and 10x3. And finally, I'm going to add a little label to the lining, and that's totally optional. Okay, so use your patterns to cut out your exterior fabric, your lining fabric, and the inside layers. And then you will fuse the inside layers to the wrong side of the fabrics per the directions. So this is the exterior fabric. I have a layer of woven fusible interfacing plus 1 layer of fusible fleece. For lighter weight fabrics, you can add a 2nd layer of fusible fleece here with it cut out of the seam allowances. Because this linen fabric is fairly stable and hefty in itself, I decided not to add that extra layer. I don't think it needs it. I can tell just by feeling it that it doesn't need that extra layer. And then for the lining, it is just 1 layer of fusible interfacing. Woven fusible interfacing. And as you can see, I've transferred all the markings from the pattern to the wrong side of the fabric. This helps make the clutch come together very easily without having to remeasure things. And I've also, just so it's easier for you to follow the demonstration, I've made lines to mark the 1/2 inch seam allowances on both the exterior and the lining fabric. So starting with the exterior of the clutch, I'm going to determine which is the front of the clutch and which is the back. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference. For this clutch, I really like this little pop of color for the front. The back's going to be a little bit more plain, but still cute, I think. So on the wrong side, I'm just going to mark that this is the top, or excuse me, this is the front and this is the back of the clutch. So this is the front and this is the back. And then the first step in sewing it together is to stitch a line between the 2 dots on the top and at the bottom, and this helps stabilize the top edges. So let's go do that now. Okay, I've basted a line between the 2 dots at the top and the bottom. The next step is to fold it in half, right sides together, matching the top edge. I'm just going to clip it in the center. And then clip it on the sides. And we're going to sew, starting from this dot, down using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. Now cut the corners at the bottom fold, just like that. And to make the gusset, or the top of the bag, you want to fold this top edge and align the side seam with the bottom line, the center line of the bottom of the bag, just like that. And the way I know that it's aligned properly is I'll take a pin and I'll put it right on the line, and see it's a little bit off from the side seam. So I'm going to move the side seam over a little bit, put it right into the thing, and it's still off just a bit, but it's close enough. Let's see that. Now that's perfect. See, it goes from the line to the side seam, and you want to pin that in place. Be careful not to pin it further than where this gusset line is. This is the gusset line. You'll sew along this line, so I'll do that now. You can remove the pin and also make sure that seam is open, which I've done. Now I'm going to trim it to about 1/8 of an inch. And you can discard that little piece and do the same for the other side. So it's like this. You push this edge down inside the bag, just like this. Make sure it's aligned by checking it with the pin. Put it down on that center line. Move it over a little bit. It's pretty close, but I'm going to make sure it's just right. If you don't do this alignment, the gussets will be a little wonky, and your clutch will look like it's out of alignment, basically. Okay, I'm going to sew this second gusset seam. And trim as before. And that's basically it to sew the exterior together. If you want, you can take a peek and see how it turned out. I think this is going to be really cute. I love this fabric. I've had it in my stash forever, and I'm so glad that I'm finally using it. So there you go. So put this aside, and now we'll get started on the lining fabric. Okay, now it's time to sew the lining together. Before I get started, though, I want to add this little label that I made. I've already made some marks. It's basically going to be centered horizontally and about 1 7/8 inches from the top. I'm going to set it in place. There's double-sided tape on the back of this, so it's going to stick, hopefully. There we go. Let me just double check that it's in place. Slightly. It's 1 7/8 inch from the top. And that's pretty good. And I'm going to change the color of my thread real quick and do a little, and just sew it in place. Okay, I've sewn on the label. I really love the way that turned out. And to sew the lining together, it's basically the same thing we did with the exterior. We're going to stay stitch between the dots here and here. That's just a basting stitch. And then we're going to fold it in half like this and just sew these side seams from the dot down to the bottom. So here we go. Now we're going to clip these corners. And then fold the sides down inside the bag with the seam open and pin it so that this bottom line, horizontal line, aligns with almost, I just have like a 1/16 of an inch over. Just want to make sure it aligns with that side seam. And then we're going to sew across here. So the gusset is sewn, and then we trim it to about 1/8 of an inch. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. Fold it down inside so there's a point. Make sure it's aligned properly. That goes in that bottom line. Again, it's over just slightly. Whoop, there it is. Pin it in place. And sew the bottom gusset seam. Remove the pin, trim that gusset seam allowance. Now, you want to turn it right side out, just like this, and next you'll press the seam allowances open on both the lining and the exterior. I'll go do that off camera. Okay, now it's time to sew the lining and the exterior together. So the exterior is inside out, so you see the fleece side, and then the lining is right side out. And I want this label to show on the back side of the clutch. So when you open the clutch, you see it right away. So I'm going to have this go up against the side of the clutch that's labeled back. So you basically just put the lining inside the exterior, lining up the sides, or lining up all of the edges, and clip it together along the top and the sides. These seam allowances will be open like this. So I'm just going to clip it here, here. I'm just going to do one side for now and sew together, and then I'll do the other side as well. Okay, so for the first side, I'm going to stitch from one of these dots to the corner and down to there. I'm not going to sew past that. I'm going to keep this open because it'll lay neater on the inside of the bag. So I'm just going to go from here to there, back stitching on both ends, and the same on this side, from here to there, and you'll have an opening here, which is the turning hole. I'll pull the clutch back through that hole. So here's the dot, back stitch a few times, make it really secure. And because I've pre-marked the 1/2 inch seam allowance, it's easy for me to follow that line. I'll pull these back so you can see better. This seam allowance will be open. And get as close as you can to that dot. It's hard even to see it at this, but there's the dot inside there from the lining. I'm just going to get as close as I can. Sometimes it doesn't, you don't get all the way there, but that's actually okay. And I'm going to do the same thing for this side. I'm actually going to start on the outside of the clutch. Whatever works for you with your machine is the way you should do it. So I'm going to make sure I get a good back stitch there so that doesn't try to open up on me when I'm turning the clutch. Make sure all these things are out of the way and that this little side seam is open. And I'm just going to sew right to that little dot there. I'm going to back stitch. Okay. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Except on this side, I don't need to leave the opening because we already have one turning hole. I don't need two. So I'm going to line these edges up. Make sure you keep this seam allowance just like this. You don't want to tack it down, basically. You want to keep it open like that. And then we're going to sew from that dot all the way across. I'm actually going to start here, go all the way across, and then I'm going to sew the rest of it from the inside. Or maybe I'll start on the inside. It's easier, again, for my machine. So here we go. I don't need to back stitch here because I'm going to go along that seam again. I'm going to go all the way across. Make sure the layers are lined up neatly. And make sure these seam allowances are not doubled up. Okay, right here, all the way. Watch your fingers when you get really close to this. And again, get as close as you can to that dot. And then I'll finish this seam. There's the dot. Okay, now it's time to trim the seam allowances. Everything gets trimmed about 1/4 of an inch, to 1/4 of an inch, I should say. Except right here where the curve is, or where that little pivot is, we're going to get a little bit closer, and that way we can turn that. And it doesn't really matter if the threads pull out right at that corner, that's going to be pushed inside the purse frame anyway, so it's usually not a big deal. So I'm going to trim these seams 1/4 of an inch, and at this pivot point I'm going to go a little closer to more like 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to trim it all the way down. And the same thing for the other side. trim some of these little threads. All right. So that's what it looks like before you turn it. And now we're going to pull it through the turning hole, which is right here. It's kind of small, but I know you could do it. It's easy if you push the lining out first and then push the exterior through the hole. Just be patient, try not to rip your threads. There we go. Push out the corners like that of the exterior. And turn right here where the pivot point was. Push that out. And give that a good finger press. You can roll the seam back and forth so you know it's fully turned. And I like to just clip that in place just so I don't lose that nice little corner. Same with this side. Push it out. Roll that seam. Here we go. Clip it there. Clip it there. And do it for the other side. Clip that little string. Make sure it comes all the way out. Okay, now let's push the lining inside. And just have the two gusset seams sort of nestle together. The lining is cut a little bit smaller, so you should have a nice, neat fit on the inside. And now, let's see, I'm going to roll that seam, clip that in place. Okay, now for this piece, that's where we're going to sew that together. We're going to close up that turning hole. It's kind of hard to see, but this is that stay stitch that we did at the beginning. So I'm going to fold that under right along that stitching line. Do the same thing with the lining fabric. There's that stitching line. And clip that in place. And then cut that thread. And then clip them together, aligning the two folded top edges. Okay, now we're just going to sew 1/8 of an inch, about an inch from the corner here, up, across, and down another inch on both sides, just sort of securing the layers in place. And this can be a basting stitch, and it doesn't have to be beautiful because it's going to be hidden by the purse frame. to trim my threads. And now I'm going to take it off camera and press it really well, inside and out. And then it'll be time to add the purse frame. Okay, the last step is to attach the purse frame to the fabric clutch that you've finished. And one of the things I like to do to protect the fabric from any glue spilling out during the process is to tape it off on the inside and the outside. So I've already done it on the inside. You want to make it about 3/8 of an inch from the edge, which is the same height. It's a little bit less than that, but 3/8 of an inch from the height of the purse frame. So when the purse frame slips in it, you'll make sure that you've inserted it fully, because you want to make sure that the top edge hits the top of the channel. So I've already done the inside and this side, and I'll do it here. This is just a 1/2 inch masking tape. You can also just use regular office tape. So just put it down, just kind of eyeball it. You'll get used to the distance the more you work with it. So basically you just tape it off like that. And once the glue has dried, you'll be able to remove the tape. And this is a good way to practice, especially because you don't want to get fabric, or you don't want to get glue on your fabric, because that just wrecks it. So the next thing I want to do is find the middle of the purse frame. So I'm just going to put a piece of this tape right on top of the frame. And I'm going to measure with a ruler, and I'm going to mark it with a Sharpie. Make sure that whatever you use to mark it doesn't go through the tape. I've done this a bunch of times, so I know that the Sharpie doesn't go through. So there's the center of that one, or on that side, and here's the center of this side. And I'm also going to do the same thing with the purse itself. I'm just going to lay this down. So I'm going to measure the center. That's 6 inches right there. I'm just going to put a little dot where the center is. Do that. And I'll do the same for the other side. And this just helps line up the purse frame. Okay. So the glue that I like to use the most is Beacon Advanced Craft Glue 3-in-1. I find that it's just the right consistency. It dries clear. It doesn't have a super awful odor. You should work in a ventilated area anyway, but I find this glue to be the best. It's also fairly affordable. You can find it easily in most U.S. craft stores and also online. And if this is the first time putting a frame on, I highly recommend just practicing putting the frame on, just so you know how much pressure it takes to insert the frame and you don't end up with a big gluey mess. But I've done this a million times, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So a little glue goes a long way. If you put too much glue, it oozes out from underneath the frame and it gets to be really messy. So I just put a little dot of glue about, whoops, it's not getting in there. There we go. About every 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, but a small little dot. And I find that this holds really well. When you push the fabric bag into the frame, it's going to spread out the glue evenly and attach to the fabric. And once it's cured, fully dry, it's really difficult to pull that purse out of the frame. So here we go. I'm going to do it on the other side as well. This glue is nice and fluid, so it flows, but it's not so runny that it's going to run out of your frame when you're holding it upside down. So hopefully you can see this. Put the top back on to make the consistency always good. Okay. The first thing I do is line up these center lines. And I'm going to push the fabric into the chain, and you can see into the channel of the frame, and you can see that it goes right up to the top of the tape, which is at 3/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to tape it, enough tape, pull off a piece of tape like 1.5 inches that kind of covers that and comes all the way around and attaches to the other side. And that's going to hold that in place. And then just work your way around to the side. Push it up inside there. Tape as you go. And it should work out to where, I'm going to go ahead and tape this side. It should work out so that the side seam aligns with the hinge. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to see if I can hold it up a little bit so you can see right there. It's going to align with the hinge. So I'm going to continue to press up and tape it. And I'll keep working around to this side. This takes a little bit of hand strength because you're constantly applying pressure. And once it won't slip any more into the channel, you know that it's fully inserted. Here we go. Let's go ahead and slide this one down a little bit. There we go. The glue is liquid for a little while, half an hour or so. So you've got some time to really make sure that this fabric bag is inserted just right. So that's one side. Once I do the other side, I'm going to go around and double check that it's inserted properly. So I'll do the other side. Insert this, the top. It's going to kind of catch on the side here, but just sort of ignore that or tuck it in as you go. I get a lot of questions about people looking for purse frames that have a little screw or the sew-in kind. I've only used these glue-in kind, and whoops, see that piece just wanted to, my tape wasn't long enough. So I'm going to take that off and get another piece of tape so it really holds right at this middle there. There we go. Yeah, if you use the right glue and you let it dry properly, it holds really tightly. And I've never had a problem with that. And if for some reason you don't put enough glue in there and it does want to detach from the frame, you can just pull it out because it's not holding anyway. Add a little bit more glue next time. And it should be good. So we're doing this side. I've already got the corners up in there. Put the sides in. If you push toward the hinge right here, you know that the frame is fully inserted. There we go. That's pretty good. And then this side. let me take this last bit in place, and I'm going to double check that it is nicely inserted. I'm going to redo this side right here. Bring it a little bit tighter. There we go. Okay, now I always double check before I set it aside that everything is in. I have this little screwdriver that came with an old sewing machine of mine that I keep handy, and I just kind of push in to make sure that it's really in there. This is just kind of the final step. And if some of the glue oozes out just like that little bit here, I don't know how it got in there. You can just wipe it off with your finger before it dries. You can also take a piece of tape, push it on there, pull the tape off, and the glue usually sticks to the tape. Okay, so that side's really good. It's aligned properly. The hinge is aligned with that center seam, or the side seam, excuse me. That's good. That's good. Okay, and take one little look at it. That looks good all the way across the sides and the top. And now you want to set this aside and allow it to dry several hours at least. Overnight is probably best. And once that's done, I'll come back and show you how to remove the tape and finish the bag. Okay, it's been about 4 or 5 hours. I think the glue is set pretty well. I would leave it, again, another half a day before I'd actually use it. But it's safe to take off the tape now because the glue is starting to set. So basically you just go around the clutch, take off the outside of the tape, go all along the outside. And just let's take a look at the frame itself. It doesn't look like any glue got on the outside. That side looks good. That side looks good. And we'll check the inside as well. A little bit of glue right there that just came off with my nail. So that's really good. So let's take a look. We've got the hinge is lined up with the inside and the outside side seams on both sides. And it's a nice even installation of the frame. What a cute little bag. Okay, that's it. That's how you make a classic clutch using my Classic Clutch Pro pattern.